If I could ask Clerk Segrist to call the roll.
Right. Trustee Anthony.
Present.
Trustee Foster.
Good evening.
The record reflect that Trustee Graham Hudek is not in attendance. And let the record reflect that Clerk Segrist is in attendance. Treasurer Slavens.
Good evening.
Trustee Snyderman.
Hello, everyone.
And Supervisor Williams.
Present. I'd like to call for an adoption of the agenda with one minor adjustment, and that's to add agenda item 0, which is to set a public hearing date for KINCFA Science and Technology USA Industrial Facilities Exemption Certificate to be held on October 24th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda as amended, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Did I jump ahead of myself there in a big way? We were just simply amending. Now we have to actually do agenda item 0.
Yes.
That would be the next item on our calendar. In terms of, clerk would read the motion.
All right. Mr. Supervisor, I move to set the public hearing for October 24, 2017 to consider the industrial facilities exemption application of KINCFA Science and Technology USA for real property on Michigan Avenue.
In terms of, oh, thank you, Steve. In terms of background, the Economic Development Office received an application from KINCFA Science and Technology USA requesting an industrial facilities exemption certificate for real property located at 47440 Michigan Avenue. Under Public Act 198, a public hearing must be held within 60 days of filing of a tax abatement application with proper notification as required by statute. All exemption certificates must be approved by the local unit of government and submitted to the State Tax Commission by October 31st of each year. Hence the request for the October 24th date. The other background information, as Summer had noticed, that this was an item that was on our agenda a few weeks back. KINCFA approached us and asked to withdraw the request, and now they came back in today with new updated information, sat down with Kristen Kolb, legal counsel, and Kristen Thomas out of Economic Development, and the agreement was made that we would go ahead and request that this public hearing occur. Are there any board questions, comments? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion as presented, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have one item on our study session agenda this evening, and that's drains and drain assessments. We've got a full complement of presenters from Wayne County, which we sincerely appreciate the effort that's gone into preparing for this evening and taking time out of your busy schedule during the week and the evening to come down and present to us. We appreciate that very much. Tim, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So first, want to acknowledge the board's support for listening to us for now the 4th of 8 study session topics that we have scheduled. You've officially made it halfway. We've covered county roads, solid waste and landfills, the capital improvement program, and now tonight county drains. So as I said, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe sometimes not the most exciting topics, but all the same very important topics to the community, very important topics to what we do. Down the road, expect the final 4 cemeteries, water, sewer, and fleet. So really exciting stuff to cover in the future for you.
I think we kept the most scintillating items for right here in the middle.
Exactly. But we have a number of real qualified experts to talk tonight on this particular issue, representing primarily Wayne County. Bernard Parker is here on behalf of the Executive's Office. Almika Steele is the, I think still interim Deputy Director for DPS and the Environmental Group?
Yes.
Okay, got it right. And then Stacy Hissong is here as counsel to the Drain Commission Office. Rodney Valet as one of the engineering technical consultants to the Drain Commission Office. And Chris Mattson, also from the Spicer Group, the technical engineering consultants to the Drain Commission Office. And then internally in the back row, we've got Bob Belair, our Public Works Manager, and Bill Bill Surchak, our engineering services manager. We do have some handouts on the back, or I guess the way we're oriented tonight, the side counter. So make sure and grab one of those, or if you want any information after the meeting, don't hesitate to ask us, and we can make that available to you electronically or in hard copy. We're going to reserve some questions for the end and try and let these guys get through their official PowerPoint presentation. But I just leave you with one thought before they start, and that is, in looking at the list of drains that we were provided, which is really nice because it had the dates when those drains were originally established here in the state of Michigan. 60% of those drains were established prior to 1900. So it kind of puts things in perspective. These are very old, pieces of infrastructure through the community, and it's really important that I think the board get a foundation on county drains because, as I think you know already, we do field a number of questions. We field a number of complaints with respect to county drains, and hopefully tonight will be kind of a starting point to resolve some of those. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Elmika to kind of kick it off.
Everyone. Again, my name is Elmika Steele, and thank you very much for Supervisor Williams and for the board for having us here. We will do our best to make this topic as exciting as we can. We do have a PowerPoint presentation prepared, but just to echo the comments by Tim, drains are very important, and I know that sometimes infrastructure that people do not always sometimes see, or they may not realize how it impacts their daily lives. It sometimes does not get the attention that it deserves, but it's certainly something that we are all passionate about, and we are certainly here to serve you and to answer any questions you may have. But to just start it off, I think it will help if we go through the PowerPoint presentation. And if you have some questions, there is a section where we have questions and answers at the end, so you may want to jot them down as we're going through so we can try to get through the presentation in a sufficient time for you this evening. So again, Ms. Hissong is here, and she represents most of the drain commissioners in the state of Michigan. She truly is an expert in this particular area and brings a wealth of knowledge. So we will be going through the PowerPoint presentation together as the slides go through, and I'll turn it over to Stacy to get us started.
Right. Good evening. As Elmika mentioned, I'm a drain attorney. There's not many attorneys in the state who, admit to that, let alone that's what their practice area is. And I'm with the law firm of Fahey, Schultz, Bursick, Rhodes, and Okemos, and I represent the Michigan Association of County Drain Commissioners and about over 40 drain offices. Our office actually does more township work than drain commissioner work. We represent over 120 townships throughout the state of Michigan. So that's basically our two areas of expertise, which makes it absolute pleasure to be here tonight because townships play such an important role when it comes to drains. So I apologize. I'm going to put my professor hat on and give you a little history lesson. And I think it's so important to do that because, as was mentioned, most of these drains were established before 1900, and so drains bring out the passion in people, and I think it's important, especially in Michigan, to explain how we got to where we are today, and I think that understanding of where we started and how we got to where we are today helps everybody understand the situation we have much better. So I am, like I said, putting on my professor hat, and Chris, we're going to start out with the drain code. I brought a copy of the drain code. It's huge. Actually, if you were looking at all the environmental laws in the state of Michigan are codified in NREPA, the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Act. This is actually bigger just for the drain code than NREPA. And if you were to read it, and I don't recommend it unless you were trying to fall asleep at night, you'll see that much of the language has not changed for years and years and years. And when I say years, perhaps even more than a century. The same language remains, and that is because people cannot agree on how to change it. So we'll go through. Here's a lovely quote from Justice Markman. I like this quote a lot because I was involved in this case and I won. So I'm going to quote from the opinion where I was successful. The Drain Code is an exceedingly complex statute, the provisions of which are apparently known by few in the profession and understood by far fewer. That is most definitely the case. People don't understand the Drain Code, and we're not going to go through the 600 some sections of the Drain Code tonight, but we will cover a few of the hot topics. Okay, so why we have a Drain Code, and it's actually unique to Michigan. No other state in the nation has a Drain Code like Michigan does, and that is because of basically what's included in this quote. We were uninhabitable as a state, as a territory, before drainage came to Michigan. So the land before drains, so my story, as Elmika mentions, really starts with the War of 1812 and how we got our current drainage system. So back in the War of 1812, President Madison decided to give lands to soldiers who participated in the war as part of the compensation for war, and he sent General Tiffin, who was the U.S. surveyor, out to Michigan to survey it. And he literally stopped. Actually, several of the surveyors died during that expedition and came back, and the quote is there that it was not worth his time surveying. He did not recommend giving land which he deemed as worthless to soldiers, and they actually went to a couple of different states and gave the lands away. To understand what this state looked like, it's really interesting to see. So a lot of the problem was, like I said, surveyors actually died during the opportunity or the attempt to survey Michigan because of cholera, because of sickness. One of our governors actually died of cholera. They shut down Fort Saginaw because of cholera. At one point during the Civil War, Michigan State University was closed down due to malaria. So it began for a couple of reasons why we have major drainage in Michigan. First, because of the sickness involved with the standing water, it was not safe to be here, and you couldn't get from place to place. We were literally underwater. I have the quote about Lansing in there. There was a developer in New York who bought the land where Lansing was, sight unseen. He didn't know when he bought it that it was several feet underwater, and that developer gifted that land to the state of Michigan in hopes of them constructing the Capitol, and he was definitely a developer because he retained all the land surrounding Lansing. When they drained the land for the Capitol, his land thus became much more valuable as a result. So that's really how we had our beginnings. And the governor at the time of the Tiffin report was our territorial governor, and he was very displeased with that, and he put together a huge campaign, if you want to change the slide, to drain Michigan. And basically, you can't have roads without drains. And so one of his major goals was to create a road between Detroit and Chicago, and you had to drain that land before you could build the roads. If you were to go into the thumb, most of the roads were built on the spoil, so to speak, of the drains. They dug the drain to drain it. They used the dirt they dug to dig the drain to make the roads. So that's really how we got our beginnings with regard to this. So drains in Michigan was for survival, but also began for development and economic development as well as just being able to live here. In preparing for my Supreme Court oral arguments, I came upon this 1919 report, and it was very interesting to me because they complained about the drain code. It was hard to read in 1919, so I thought that was amusing. But it talked about that Michigan was not the wettest state in the nation. We're actually the 5th wettest state in the nation, but we are the most drainage dependent. So in other words, if you can drain certain lands, soils can produce very high volume agricultural production. So as an example, you try to drain the Everglades, you're not going to have the agricultural production that we did in Michigan. So we are the most drainage dependent state in the United States. While we may not be the wettest, we are the most drainage dependent. And to give you an idea, that is that second bullet from the bottom that talks about 1919 numbers. The increase from drainage alone was over $62 million increase in land value back in those days because of the value of drainage. So that just gives you an idea how important that was. So we had many, and I literally could talk for hours about the drain laws at the beginning of Michigan. We had drain code before we had a state. One of the first laws as a territory, one of the first laws passed in the state of Michigan was for drainage. We had township drain commissioners at the township level before we had county drain commissioners. Many, believe it or not, of the drains listed here in Canton Township were formed by the Canton Township Drain Commissioner. That was in place, and then in the early 1900s that was converted to county drain commissioners. They abolished the office of Township Drain Commissioners. So that's how that process started. And as you can see, there was amendments frequently during the 19th century and early 20th century to accommodate the need for drainage. What we saw was first to develop the lands to make it habitable, but then we saw land gets divided. At the beginning, there wasn't disputes about drainage because you owned all the land, you could make your own drains. Land became divided, and now you have more neighbors who couldn't agree as to how to solve that drainage problem. Thus, it became a necessity to create public drainage ways. And that's why we have so many drains in places like Canton Township that were taken over by the county. All right, so we talked about the territorial writs, the early state laws. I'm going to spend a little bit of time before we get to the early 20th century laws talking about the Swampland Act and President Millard Fillmore. I'm sure everybody knows, not many people quote President Fillmore in their PowerPoint presentations, but I'm going to talk about that because it was huge for the state of Michigan. The Swampland Act was where the federal government owned a lot of lands that were, for all intents and purposes, swamp. And they gave those to the states to use however they chose to. So in Michigan, between 1850 and 1890, the federal government gave the state of Michigan 6 million acres of land in the state to do with as they wished. And so they could sell it, or they could use it for contracts to pay contractors to do work such as road work or drainage work. And so a lot of our drains, as you can see on the list, were established during that time period. I was looking over a drain matter over by the Lansing area for, I think it was the Maple River, and that was how they paid for the drain work at the time. Was 12 sections of land in Gratiot County, six in Clinton County, 6 in Gratiot County. That was the contract amount for the contractor who did the drain work. Edward Sparrow from Sparrow Hospital fame was actually the contractor that did the work in the 1800s, and that's how he was paid, with those 12 sections of land. All right, so early drainage techniques, super fancy stuff here. Basically the drain commissioner's role from the early 1800s through actually the Depression was to get water away as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And see, these are some of the early drainage techniques used in that area. And, we have the opportunity, especially in Wayne County, we review a lot of the old drain files and drain easements, and the easements are on onion skin paper and are also very interesting. We had an easement that I've looked at before that the easement width is often listed just as sufficient width or in rods and chains. I've had several come across where it's, from such and such tree to such and such rock. My personal favorite is the easement width is wide enough to turn around a team of mules. And those are the actual easements that we're utilizing today here in Wayne County. So it makes for fun to try to figure out how that applies to modern day parcels and subdivisions, but we manage. This is one of my favorite slides in terms of best management practices for how drain work was used to be performed. This is an ad from the American Forestry magazine from DuPont Chemical, and they were selling dynamite, and that was the best way to straighten drains. And to do drain work was simply to use dynamite. And they, in their ad, they talk about thousands of miles of drains were straightened using DuPont dynamite. So things have changed just a little bit in our great state. Okay, so now we come to the Drain Code of 1956. This is the last time it was recodified, and again, it's not much different from the 1800s language, and it has, while it's been amended many, many times, it has not been recodified. There were many, many attempts to try to do that. I've been involved in literally hundreds of hours of committee testimony at the legislature to try to completely redo it, and you would not believe the interest groups that come out that you wouldn't imagine to talk about drainage, and no one can agree, so it takes a lot of votes to pass a bill, and with that much dissension, it does not happen. So we are left with the Drain Code of 1956. Since then, there has been some major things that have happened when it's regard to drainage, and as you can imagine, the next big sea change for drain commissioners came with the adoption of the Clean Water Act in 1972 and the following statutes that Michigan adopted related to our environmental laws. So prior to the Clean Water Act, really, drain commissioners were not concerned at all about the environment. They were concerned about health and economic development, and not really what water quality concepts were concerned. And so in the 1970s, when this took place, that made a major change in how drain commissioners viewed their work. In fact, a drain case was the first case under the Michigan Environmental Protection Act, and it received national news at the time because Michigan had the first MEPA, or Environmental Protection Act, of the individual states. So it was quite the thing in the 1970s. And a major change for drain commissioners. You know, drain commissioners, like I said, weren't at all involved in that, and no, it doesn't seem like that long ago, 1972, but during that time frame, the demographic of who holds the office as drain commissioner and what they do has changed unbelievably. I get often asked, how big of a deal was the Clean Water Act? And I like to show this next before and after picture. This is the Red Cedar River. This is actually on campus at Michigan State University at the canoe livery. And yes, it has made a difference in water quality and what things look like today. So the Clean Water Act, I mean, it really has changed how we do business, and it has changed for the better what our waterways in Michigan looks like. So we then talk about balancing the modern role, and again, I represent drain commissioners throughout the state of Michigan. Drainage is our first and foremost concern, but we're also very concerned about costs. We're aware that township government doesn't have the monies that were available to them 50 years ago. The drain office doesn't have the monies available to it as it did 50 years ago. I was just at the Michigan Wetlands Association giving a presentation about drains there last week, and I told them it's been my experience working all across the state. The size of the drain office from 1950 to today has shrunk, not expanded, despite the increasing requirements. In Wayne County, that is definitely the case too, and Wayne County is not unique in that. Because of how the state of Michigan finances local government, the responsibilities remain or have increased, but the size of the staff in every county office I deal with has decreased in that time period. And so much like townships, we are trying to do more with significantly less. So that's my history lesson on the drain code in general, and now I want to talk a little bit about what affects you as a township and your property owners on how a petitioned project works. So we're going to get into how a project works, and then we're going to get into a little bit on how you establish a drain. But most of the drains have already been established, and now we're just dealing with improvement projects.
And just to clarify, when we start talking about this does not include maintenance that we do on drains, you know, on an annual basis. This is for improvements to the drain. So I just want to make that distinction when we
Right.
start talking about a petition project. And this is just because the drain code allows for maintenance under a certain limit, and then in order to do an improvement to a drain, it actually requires a petition.
Absolutely, and so we're gonna go through the petition projects first, and then we'll go through some information about non-petition projects where the drain commissioner, without some action by property owners or municipality, can take action on with regard to the drains. So any major improvement project, or actually a significant maintenance project, requires a petition. And a petition can be by a single township, city, or village, or it can be started by 5 property owners. And so that starts the process. After the petition, then we have what's called a board of determination. And that's where the drain commissioner appoints 3 property owners that live and own property in Wayne County, but not in any part of any municipality that has lands in that drainage district. And they hear testimony as to whether a project is necessary and decide whether to move forward or not. This process, I find these board of determinations, is really hard for property owners to grasp, because it's so different than a water or a sewer project that you would see under Act 188, where when you go to this hearing to see if a project should move forward, we know what the project scope is going to be. We have a really good idea of what the costs are going to be. That is not the case whatsoever under the drain code. It is set up completely differently than that. So under 188, you have to have so many percent of the property owners in the township interested in doing the project. It takes 5 with a drain project. And I want to express to you why that has not changed in almost 200 years. Because when you're dealing with a watershed, the contribution of many properties leads to the problems of a minority, of a few people. And so the drain code is specifically set up so that a very small minority of that proper special assessment who's receiving the receiving waters of the contributions of many can start that process. So it's very hard for property owners to understand that, and then to understand that we don't know what the project is going to look like and how much it costs. That is at the end, is not at the beginning. And that's the statute requires that. So I know when Almeka has boards of determination, why aren't you telling us how much this is going to cost? Why aren't you telling us what this is going to do? The statute is not set up that way. It is not anything like 188. So the way a board of determination is set up is the board doesn't decide how much or who pays or how much each person pays or what the project is going to be. They either say, yes, something needs to be done, or no, it doesn't need to be done. And then the entire decision as to the scope of the project is made up by the drain commissioner. Again, because the drain commissioner's role is to protect the small number of property owners who are affected by the contribution of the entire watershed. And again, that may seem like, why doesn't it get to be a vote? I rarely go to a board of determination where they say, let's vote, because it should be everybody agrees. But it's not that way. I often hear, I live at the top of the hill and I've never had any problems and I don't understand why I should pay. Well, when you live at the top of the hill, guess where the water goes? Down, and it's going to land on somebody else's property who needs that assistance. And so we are not a popularity contest. We're never going to win a popularity contest when it comes to that, because the statute is specifically set up not in that way. So after a board finds a project necessary, and many times they find it not necessary. I was at a board of determination last week where it was found not necessary. They move forward with the engineering and scope decisions. The Wayne County Drain Commissioner, much like other county offices, does not do that in a vacuum. Stakeholders are often requested for input, including the roads department, the townships, property owners, in making the decisions as to what the scope of the project should be. After the scope has been decided, there's a final order of determination. They take bids, and then they have what's called a day of review, where the property owners get to find out what their percentage of the project cost would be and what the project is and what the assessments will be. Unlike other projects, property assessments, and we'll get to this in greater detail later, are only once a year, only on the winter taxes by statute, levied as a line item on your winter taxes.
Stacey, if I can add a few comments about the Board of Determination meeting. One thing I just wanted to mention is that notice is given to the residents in the drainage district. So prior to that meeting, you will receive a notice in the mail stating the date, time, and the location. So it certainly is an open meeting. Residents are obviously encouraged to come out, but as Ms. Hissong mentioned, sometimes we found situations where the petitioners may show up, may not show up. Most of them do, but you will get a large number of individuals who say, why am I here? I don't have a problem. I don't understand this. Why do I have to pay for something? We do have engineers present during those meetings, and oftentimes we'll have a PowerPoint to highlight areas of concern along the drains to help explain for the people who may live some distance. Maybe they're not directly along the drain, but again, their water is contributing to that drain, to help them understand what the issues are. But everyone who attends the meeting is allowed to give public comment and to give their viewpoint on whether or not the project should be found necessary. If the Board of Determination determines that it is not necessary, then there's a window of 1 year before the residents or the township could bring another petition.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what a drain is, because I think sometimes people don't understand that. Drains can be rivers, creeks, streams, any of the things listed on the bullets that help for stormwater. So I'll be talking about a river or a drain, and they'll say, no, that's not a drain, that's a river. It's both. Under the law, it's a drain even though it has the name of a river or a creek. Like Willow Creek as an example, maybe a creek, but it's established as a county drain through that process, and so there's jurisdiction taken.
And, I was going to say, and in Wayne County, we also have some sanitary drains. So just depending, some of them are stormwater, some are sanitary.
Okay, so who has jurisdiction over drains? The drain commissioner doesn't have jurisdiction over anything that provides, deals with, manages stormwater, only those that have went through the process of being established under the drain code. So most stormwater conveyance systems aren't established as county drains, but there are hundreds of them in the state of Michigan. In fact, I think we counted the number of miles. There's more miles of drains in Wayne County than there is roads. You may not know that, but there really are. So if it's established through that drain code, then the drain commissioner has jurisdiction. I know Almika's office gets a lot of complaints about drains not working along a road. Some of those are under the jurisdiction of the drain commissioner. Most of those are under the jurisdiction of the road department or MDOT. Again, they can look exactly the same, and one's under the jurisdiction and one is not. It depends on if it went through the process or not. And we have a route and course for exactly what's under their jurisdiction of the drain office and what is not. Municipalities often have jurisdiction over certain stormwater systems. Some are not under a governmental jurisdiction. It might be subdivision or condo associations have the ability to maintain those, or they're just private stormwater systems. Then we have some that I refer to as orphans, that perhaps someone the farmer put in the 1920s, and it's been subdivided over and it's never been established, and people use it and have been using it for years, and it's nobody's at this point. Nobody has jurisdiction over it from a governmental entity standpoint because the process haven't went through, but it physically exists. And there are many, many of those throughout the state of Michigan, and definitely in Wayne County and Canton Township. All right, so what is established as county drains in Canton Township? There are 42 drainage districts in the county. 40 drains actually are physically located, have parts of them at least, are wholly located within Canton Township, 75.4 miles. And you have some drains outside of Canton Township, but that serve Canton Township property. So part of the watershed is in Canton Township, but the physical infrastructure is not, if that makes sense. And I think you were provided a packet of information showing the locations and the watersheds or drainage districts served by each of those drains in your packets. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, for petitioning, if something needs major improvements, who can petition. So again, we talked about 5 property owners. A single township, regardless of how many townships are in, or cities are in the drainage, the watershed, can petition. A road commission or MDOT can also petition. You have a couple of inter-county drains that are actually drains that serve lands in more than one county in Canton Township. The property owner requirement for signatures is different for inter-county drains than county drains, but still one township, one municipality can cause a petition for that to take place. And new drains, there's a different property owner signature requirement to take something that's currently not under the jurisdiction and establish that as a county drain. All right, we talked a lot already about the Board of Determination, so I think I already covered the information under that slide. In many circumstances, that's the first time that a property owner, when they receive a Board of Determination notice, knows that they even have a drainage district, that they're even part of a drainage district, or that they even know the Office of the Drain Commissioner exists in Wayne County. So it's quite a eye-opening experience for those who have had the joy of attending one of those. Okay, there is an opportunity to appeal the decision of the Board of Determination for necessity. And again, the appeal is not what is going to happen, but whether that decision, yes or no, happens, and that goes to circuit court. We see these from time to time, to be honest, not very often, because the standard of review is an administrative appeal. There's no trial that the judge sits through. They review the record of that Board of Determination and determine whether the board had sufficient evidence to find necessity or no necessity. All right, so what steps go into the Drain Commissioner's determination as to what should take place? Obviously, input from the property owners and the different stakeholders is involved, but engineering takes place to determine is there a capacity issue, is there soil erosion issue, what type of issues are there involved with the drain. If there's property acquisition that is necessary, obviously that plays a role. The input, and then whether there are DEQ permits necessary. If you've been involved in public infrastructure projects, you know that can be time consuming, and depending on the type of permit needed, very expensive.
You know, one other thing I will add here is that the other piece of it is financing. That's a big part of the process when you're trying to determine how, at the end, once you determine what the scope will be, and you go through the bid letting process, how you're going to pay for it. Oftentimes, I believe residents think there is a large pool of money sitting in the cash accounts for drains, and it actually is not. So for, petition projects, very large projects, financing has to be arranged.
I think y'all makes a very important comment, and I'm going to talk about it a little later, but I want to right now, because we talk about $5,000 per mile per year. We're going to talk about that for non-petition maintenance. And throughout the state, I often get, well, your budget is $5,000 a mile. Why aren't you taking care of things? I want to be clear, and it's not just Wayne County, it's throughout the state of Michigan. There are $0 from general funds that go to county general funds throughout the state, or from state government that goes to drains. It is paid for solely by the special assessment districts. The watershed encompasses the special assessment district. And so for every dollar spent by the drain commissioner, the property owners and municipal entities within that special assessment district pay 100% of the cost of that. So there is no budget that the drain office gets to perform their duties. It is completely paid for by special assessments within those entities. All right, so after the project scope has been determined, we enter what's called a final order that sets out the route and course, or where the drain commissioner has jurisdiction. The projects are built out. We put together a computation of cost, and we have a day of review of apportionments. And at that day of review, we invite all the property owners within the drainage district to review the scope of the project and the cost of the project. At that day, we're going to get into the assessment part in a little bit, so I'll save that fun for later. The biggest part of what drain offices do day-to-day basis is not petition projects. In my experience, a petition project on a drain happens about once every 40 years. In Wayne County and Canton Township, you're probably running a little higher than every 40 years. I think you have some drains who have not seen did not see major work in the 1900s at all. And so there are some of your drains in Canton County or in Canton Township who have not seen major improvement projects so long ago that the life of any infrastructure in the ground has long exceeded its design life. That is not unique to Canton Township, but it is definitely true that that is the case in your township. So most of the time, we're not doing petitioned work, we're doing non-petitioned maintenance. And that still is paid for by the property owners and municipal entities within that special assessment district, but it doesn't require some sort of action by a municipal entity or property owners to do that. It can be done at the discretion of the drain office. When you are dealing with a small staff and literally hundreds of drains, the maintenance project, how that comes to be is, we call it service requests. Others might call it complaints. I like to use the term service requests instead, and normally it is whoever calls and says that there's a problem on their drain, that's where the drain office performs the maintenance. Like I said, I work for the association. I work for pretty much every active county drain office in the state, and there are some that are worked on, I would say, less than a dozen in a county on an annual basis proactively. It is complaint basis because there are just so many drains that each county drain office has. It is impossible to, if you want to say you're working on, 10% per year, every 10 years you want to hit it, you're working on over 100 drains, and that's if nothing happens to the rest of them. No acts of God, no significant storm. So it's basically impossible to have a proactive maintenance, although I think we tried to do that. I think
Absolutely.
That's Elmika's goal.
Yes, absolutely.
I think right now the goal instead is to meet up with a service request.
Right, and we do, and we have the information in the packet at the end. You can call our office. You can also submit a service request online through the county's website. We certainly want to be responsive. And again, there are certain limitations. And I should say this. The drain code does provide for these limits, and I think that the intent was honestly to try to keep costs, reduced for the municipalities and for the property owners that would ultimately be paying the assessment. Obviously, as you can imagine, now let me also say this, the drain code was amended. It's $5,000 now. So prior to the last amendment, it was $2,500, and then for many years it was $1,500. Even at $5,000, it oftentimes does not go very far, and attempts to revise the limits have not really gone too far in the legislature. And again, I truly think that the idea is to keep the limit as low as possible, because ultimately property owners and municipalities will have to pay, but there has to be a give at some point, and I think that's probably where the petition project idea comes in. With that, there is not this $5,000 per mile limit, but oftentimes property owners and sometimes municipalities may be hesitant to petition on a project, especially because of the way the drain code is laid out. You don't know up front what the cost will be. You make that determination as you go along.
So what's frustrating for property owners is you have these very low maintenance amounts, and you could go years without maintenance being performed. And so water and sewer, you get a quarterly bill, you get a monthly bill, you know what the bill is going to be, you see it all the time, you know it, you're flushing your toilet, you're using your water faucet. You don't think about the public infrastructure that's there for what happens with your water when it rains. And it makes it even more difficult because the drain code assessment system isn't set up like water and sewer. You don't get a monthly bill, you don't get a quarterly bill. If we don't do work on your drain, you don't even get a bill annually. So you may have owned a piece of property for 5 years and never have received a drain assessment, and then 1 year it goes none, high. None, high, instead of like for water or sewer where you have monies built into the system to pay for repairs, where you have a consistent assessment amount and people are used to paying it. The drain code is not set up that way, and so we have these sporadic assessments that come into play, And that upsets people, and they're partially because they're not used to it, but it's not consistent and they're not budgeting for that. We wish that there was a way that we could make that more palatable, but that's the way the system is set up for right now. So we can only assess up to, we have a small ability to pre-assess to pay for things, but we can only assess when we expend the money, so we can't build the accounts up so that when something significant does happen, we're prepared for that financially. The way the law is set up is you can only assess after basically you've already incurred that expense, making our popularity grow even more. So, on with the non-petition maintenance. There is opportunities to exceed the maintenance amount without petitions, and many townships and cities in Wayne County utilize this, and that's for a township resolution to allow us to exceed that amount. That's allows us to do a little bit more extensive maintenance without going through that more difficult petition process, and we have used that successfully in other situations, especially when it's a large drainage district, and you have a couple of those in Canton Township where you can far exceed the $5,000 a mile, and it's only going to have a few dollars of property assessment, and you can get a lot done. So your Fellows Creek drain, your Willow Creek drain, those are drain projects where if we came up with a big maintenance project, we could use a township resolution, and the assessment to the property owners would not be that significant, basically due to the size of the watershed. All right, so Elmika, if you want to talk about this one a little bit, requesting maintenance in Wayne
Yes.
County.
So as I mentioned, we definitely encourage you to contact us if you notice that there is a drain that needs to be serviced. And we have our phone number here on the screen for you to call. And the website there, and I see that's a pretty long address. If you go to waynecounty.com and you look under department, you'll see environmental services, and you would see a button to click on for county drains. And again, you can submit that information, and our drains manager receives that and will be able to get that scheduled. And we ask that you give details. Sometimes we get phone calls where someone will say, there's a problem on, this drain, and then they hang up. They leave no address. I mean, the drains can often be some length. So it's very helpful if it's detailed. We like details, the address, if a person doesn't mind leaving their name and phone number so that our staff can follow up personally and get more information that's needed. And again, explain if you're noticing issues with any flooding, obstructions, erosion. We want to know so that we can make a determination. Often, after the staff goes out in response to a service request, they will do what we are allowed to do statutorily for maintenance. If there is an issue that is identified as needing to be in the category of an improvement that would require a petition, we can make a petition available for property owners to begin the process of getting that signed. And again, there needs to be 5 property owners who would sign the petition.
All right, drain assessments are, again, much different than water or sewer assessments, and the drain code provides a lot of direction. They should be based on benefits derived. That's the beginning and end of the direction as to how assessments should be determined for drain projects. So apportionments, again, it's a little different. We deal with percentages of benefit equaling 100%, and then you take your percentage, you multiply it by the cost of the project, and that's how much your assessment is going to be. So apportionment is the percent, assessment is the dollar amount. And so whatever apportionment or percent you get set for your property or for your township, that percent stays until there's a new public hearing to revise those percentages. So if your percentage is 10% and we spend $1,000 one year, then you pay 10% of $1,000, that's your assessment. If we have a more extensive project and it's $10,000, then again, your assessment is 10% of that. So that percentage stays with your parcel or for a township as your at-large assessment. So, for apportionments, that's how that works, and it always has to equal 100%. So if a property owner came to the drainage district and said, we want to reduce your, reduce my assessment, it needs to be lower because of this or this or this, that has to go on someone else's property or be spread, because at the end, it always has to equal 100% to pay for the project. Again, when you have appeals and it goes to the tax tribunal and you're not successful, then that comes out of the general fund perhaps. That's not how appeals work for drains. If you appeal as a township and say, I want mine changed from 20% to 10, that 10% has to go on someone else. At the end of the day, it doesn't come out of the county's general fund, or there's no dollars in the drain commissioner's funds, so it has to be somewhere else within that special assessment district. Okay, apportionments. Under the drain code, they go to townships, cities, and villages at large for basic public health benefit. And I can tell you, since Almika has been involved and we've been doing the new updated days of reviews, I think almost across the board, Rodney, the Wayne County has lowered the at-large assessment to the townships and villages, because how local units get money from the state government has changed, and we recognize that, and so the at-large assessments have been reduced to the municipalities, not just in Canton Township, but throughout Wayne County. Does that? All right, so then there's assessments to MDOT for benefit to state highways. That is one area where we don't seek to reduce it. The engineers, I think, do a very good job in finding ways to make their case that MDOT should receive as high of an assessment as possible. There is a state calculation that is required to use. We call it 14A, but it's basically the amount of runoff based on state highways within a drainage district is how they pay their assessments. If they ask for special things to take place because of the state highways presence, then that's a supplemental benefit. Normally, MTOP pays for 100% of the cost of that improvement as well. The assessments to the county is for benefit to county roads, so any assessment to the county is solely for that reason, not at large to for public health, like it is for a county, and or like it is for a township, and that is based on that 14A in Wayne County calculation as well. Where the townships is based on the discretion of the drain office, and again, that's a general fund obligation, as I'm sure you folks know at the township level. For property owners, they receive the rest. So if it's 10% to the townships, 5% to MDOT, 5% to the county, that remaining 80% goes to the properties within that specific drainage district. And so we talked about the at-large assessment. Again, there's no specific formula. Township-owned property is exempt, as a state, county, federal properties are exempt from special assessment. And again, the at-large assessment is paid for by the general funds. We talked about MDOT already, so we'll skip that, and the county roads. Property owners is again based on benefit derived. There's no definition of that in the drain code, but we do have some general factors that we utilize when we're looking at that. We look at the acreage within the watershed, and some watersheds cut a parcel. So we only include the acreage within the watershed of that parcel. So if you're on the edge of the watershed, we don't look at the acreage of your entire parcel, only that specific amount that's located within. And I think we even go to the 100th of an acre when we're doing that. We look at the property use classification for that, and that's important because different properties use different amounts. There's different what we call runoff that comes from that, whether impervious surface or impervious surface. So vacant land, the water can go through that vacant land easier than if it's covered by parking lot. So on a per acre basis, vacant or agricultural land normally has a lower assessment than residential land. Residential land has a lower assessment than commercial land. Commercial land has a lower assessment per acre than industrial land. So we look at each property classification to determine the runoff coefficient to utilize. So every property is not treated the same amount per acre. We look at that runoff coefficient. When we're doing an improvement project, we're going to look at the scope of the project. So if we have a subdivision where we're putting in all new drainage system just for that subdivision, that's only one piece of the watershed, we're going to give them a higher assessment than somebody else who's far away from that specific part of the work. Again, runoff goes with a property use classification, and if we're providing specific flood relief to certain properties as a part of our project, we're going to take that in consideration as part of the assessment determination as well. There is this day of review where you can come in, and we have the whole day where property owners can come in and say, my assessment should change, you have my property classification wrong, you have 5 acres of my 10-acre piece in, but I can show you where that is not the case, and we have made changes based on property owners coming in and asking us to look at their property with more specificity, and so we do make those types of changes. If you disagree, there is a process through probate court where a board of review is held to look at that, and again, it's not tax tribunal. Drain assessments are specifically exempted from the tax tribunal, and we have this board of review. And if they decide to change your percentage, then that percentage has to go to someone else. And so they're readjusting the rule to equal 100% in those situations.
And I just want to add, notice is given and mailed out for the date of the day of review, time, location, same as with the Board of Determination meeting.
Yep. Now, the statute hasn't changed, so it literally says post in 5 public places from, again, the 1800s, but in Wayne County, their mode of operation is to let everybody in the drainage district know because the rule is completely open at that point. Okay, so we have the board of review, and if they decide to make the change again, they have to make it 100%. Drain easements I want to talk about because they are a different animal, and again, this causes a lot of property owner complaints. So you heard we have some of these, you have to have a drain easement before you can establish the drain, so some of our easements are from Civil War time. And they're not legally described with your subdivision lots as a result. And more importantly, they're not recorded with the Register of Deeds, and your title company exempt those from your title insurance. So the first time the Michigan legislature required drain easements to be recorded was in 1956. So if we obtained an easement prior to 1956, it's not going to show up in your title work. As it was already noted, most of the drains in Canton Township were established before 1900, let alone 1956. So almost every drain easement in Canton Township is not recorded with the Register of Deeds, and that's the way the statute is set up. That makes it difficult for, and title companies don't check with us to let you know when you buy a house that there's a drain easement. So that's a surprise to a lot of people when they find out that they have a drain easement on their property. So that's important for you folks to know when you get those complaints that, you know, people didn't know it's because the drain easements aren't on their property. And again, those are a specific, when you read the fine print of your title commitment, you'll find that those are exempted. So with a drain easement, again, it's just an easement. It's not taking in fee. The property owner retains ownership of the easement area, but it's restricted in use. So as an example, permanent structures should not be in the easement area. That makes it difficult to maintain the drain. Now, does that happen? Oh, yes. And it increases the cost of maintenance and our ability to perform maintenance. We have a petition project where we're looking at it, and the biggest cost is to work around the swimming pools and the fences and the shrubs and the gardens and the shrubs to get to that project. And when you say you have an easement and you have a right to take out, that's landscaping. That is not also very popular. And that landscaping was probably put in without any knowledge at all that they were doing so in a drain easement. So we have some you know, perceptions to overcome that isn't our fault. It's just the way the legislature has set this up. And to go in and record them, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of those. It's not easy to do. They're, like I said, on onion skin and sufficient width, or team of horses, or, you know, 200 feet in many cases. And so many of our easements might take up the entire subdivision lot. So it's a process that I think the drain office works, especially in Wayne County, very carefully with the property owners to try to avoid that. But some of those encroachments are unavoidable when you're trying to take major equipment through to work on storm drainage.
And the other thing to add to that is because in some instances, because of the encroachments, it is so difficult for contractors to work. It often drives up the cost for the work to be done. So again, you're continuing, if you have a petition project, you have an increased cost. If you have just a maintenance project that needs to be done, again, that could eat very quickly into your $5,000 per mile annual limit.
It is, in some cases, the most expensive cost of a project. We were in a different township in Wayne County, and it was a 1860s drain, last improved in 1921. And we had an angry group of property owners. Why did you build your drain under my swimming pool? Well, we didn't, but they didn't know. I mean, there's no way to know that, and so it makes it very difficult for them to understand, and it makes it very difficult for us to do our work. One point back on that slide I want to make, the drain office often gets calls, please take care of your easement area, please remove trees, please pick up the garbage in your easement area. That is not what that's not the drain office's responsibility. We don't own the property. If it is in the drain and causing obstruction, we will take care of it. But if it's simply, we don't want the poison ivy in the drain easement, please remove it. That's, unless it's causing a problem with drainage, that is not the responsibility of the drain office. That is the private property owner's responsibility, regardless of whether there's a drain easement there or not. Revising district boundaries. Many of your property owners in Canton Township have received notices about updating the district boundaries. That was a major undertaking, and I give the drain office in Wayne County a lot of credit to do it because, again, it was not very popular, but it was very necessary.
So again, and just to go back, if you remember a few slides back about the apportionment and the percentages that were set, again, if you can imagine, years and years and years have passed in some cases since those have been revised. And Stacy certainly worked very hard to get an amendment to the drain code in
2013.
So it would allow for the drainage district boundaries to be revised and for you to have a new day of review so you can update the drainage district boundaries. Of course, with the development, things have changed. Maybe there was a parcel that was in a drainage district that no longer is. Well, it's not fair for that property to still be receiving an assessment when you have another property that now is contributing water to a particular drain that isn't paying an assessment. So starting a couple years ago, we did say we wanted to undertake that, start a process to get the drainage district boundaries revised, and notices went out to everyone, and of course, some people, why am I here? Why am I getting this? Really and truly, the intent was, we believe that the properties that should be paying should pay, but those who should not be, it wasn't fair to continue to assess them.
Yeah, as you look at the list, just the first one, Barker Drain, 1866. The watershed lines were set in 1866, and before this amendment, there wasn't a way to update those. So you can probably imagine that the drainage patterns have changed a little since 1866, but the special assessment district didn't, and it was completely unfair to assess that way. And Wayne County was one of the first counties that said, we are not going to do this anymore. We are not going to levy assessments unless we make sure that our districts are accurate. And it was a major undertaking, but I think very worthwhile. Yes.
That process is still underway.
All right, so as we talked about, those revisions were required to, again, surveying techniques were down to the 100th of an acre. When we were talking 1866, the surveying techniques were a little bit different. They basically followed whoever the property, the lines of the property, whoever owned it in the 1800s. So if you owned a 400-acre parcel, that was the boundary. Obviously, things have been subdivided and it doesn't match up anymore. So there was a number of different reasons why those boundaries were incorrect and needed updating. In Wayne County, they utilize what's called LIDAR. And Rodney, if you want to talk a little bit, because I know you do. A little bit about the process that Spicer went through in updating the district boundaries.
And LIDAR is just a fancy way of basically saying that we had aerial imagery that we could get elevations from that are not as accurate as, topographic elevations that you can get on the ground, but they're very, 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 very close. In some instances, they're within an inch of the true elevation. And so we went from having contour maps just 10 years ago that would provide you a line every 5 or 10 feet to now we had these maps here that basically provided you accuracy up to a couple of inches. So it was very hard to assess a landowner when we had the information that clearly showed that their water did not drain to a specific drain. You know, it's different if we had a map that was good up to 10 feet. Well, now we had the information where they were coming in and they were saying, hey, Mr. Drain Commissioner, Mrs. Drain Commissioner, why am I paying this assessment when my drainage really goes to the north and not to the south the way that you have it on your map? Well, now we had the information to be able to pull it up in the computer, and sure enough, we were able to see, it's like, oh, they're absolutely right. Their drainage goes to the south, not to the north. So with this new information in hand, it was really a lot cheaper for the Drain Commissioner to update these drainage districts. Keep in mind that before we're having this information, there needed to be a lot of field work to verify the elevations and to verify the lay of the land and to verify the way that drainage flowed. With this information, we were able to update the drainage district. I think in Wayne County, we've updated in the range of 250, 300 drainage districts in a matter of a couple of years, just because we were able to rely on this technology. And like Stacy mentioned previously, what we're finding is that we're trying to be fair. And it was very difficult before when people would come into the meetings to review their assessment, when they know exactly the way every single square inch of their land drains, and to argue with us and to say, well, if you were to come to our property and if you were to stand here and sit here on a rainy day, you would see where the water flowed. And so with this information, we were able to do that.
So what made it extra fun for us, Wayne County is the first one I helped write the statute. And what was extra fun for us is we had these in 2014 on a Thursday and Friday, and guess what happened that Monday? Was the big flood, the flooding event. And so drains were on everybody's mind, yeah.
2014, I'm sure everyone remembers where they were.
Almika does. So that was the time period when we had our first public hearings on revising drainage districts. And I have to share, this is an example of lands added and removed. And for Wayne County, this is actually one of the ones where not that many changes were made. Some of them were unbelievably significant. But if you're one of the properties in the orange where you were paying and you shouldn't have been, it's significant regardless of the extent of the percentage change in the drainage district, because you were paying for something that you didn't benefit from. Or the folks in the blue were not paying for decades, maybe even a century, for contribution of their waters to that system. So it was very important that we go through that process. And we had literally hundreds of property owners show up to go through that process with us. And we kept track, and if they said, come out and see our property, we did. And we made revisions where it was necessary. And for those who undertook that process with us, I think they were, in the end, maybe not happy that they had to pay an assessment, but they understood the process and how it came to being that they were included in that special assessment district.
And then also prior to those hearings, we also had a hotline available, so individuals, for some reason, if they could not make it to the day of review, if they called, left their name, phone number, someone did return their call and could walk through for them again why there was a change.
All right, so there is an appeal opportunity for that. We've had several hundred of these and we had 0 appeals. I think it was because we spent so much time, we had computers available, so if a property owner was really interested, we sat down, we went to their properties to ensure that we got it right. In the end, that's what was important. We want to make sure we got it right, and we did not have any appeals on any of those hundreds of public hearings that we went through, so I'm very proud to say that. All right, so how can townships work together with drain commissioners? Again, if you're interested in a major improvement process, we can go through the petition process, participate in those boards of determination and let us know what the township board is thinking as to whether you're in favor or not in favor of a project. Be proactive in the project scope as to what needs to take place if we're doing a project in your township, what you're looking for, timing of that. If we have to dig up a road and you have a pavement project upcoming, we're going to want to try to coordinate those as an example. Assessments, we'd be pleased to go through our assessment methodology with you, and if you have questions about what our proposed assessments are going to be, we'd be pleased to go through that, and then just the basic planning of when that's going to be happening. With project scope, work with us early. The earlier the better as to what the project scope is going to be, or your needs, or your future planning for purposes. I'm working on a project right now in the southwest part of the state, and they're interested in making some significant zoning changes and changes, and they want that. And so they want developers to come in and not have to put on-site detention. So they want our drainage project sized so that new development doesn't have those requirements when they come in. It's built into our system. So we're working very closely with those communities to make sure we're planning for their growth the way they want that growth to happen in their community. Again, how can property owners help with drain commissioners preventing pollution? Fertilize your lawn sparingly. Don't dump your lawn refuse into the drains. That would be very helpful. Report polluters, all the things that we have listed on your property. If you are good stewards of your property, that definitely reduces the need for maintenance on our drains, whether it's an enclosed storm sewer or an open drain system.
And one thing, if I can address the last one about report polluters, we're not at all suggesting that if, for example, if you saw a construction truck back up to a drain and start dumping material, that you go out and confront someone, and if you see something like that, you can call the police right away if you're able to do so safely. I don't want you to be confrontational with someone, but if you can, sometime we've had residents who could identify the name on the truck, the name of the company, something where you can do that and then provide that information to us. It can be very difficult to go after individuals who are illegally dumping, but if you see something, please say something.
Yep. Chris and I are working on a project in a different county, and this man who owned 3 restaurants would bring his grease home and dump it in the catch basin in front of his house every day, which was causing major problems to that storm sewer system. And we had someone call in and report it, and we were able to take care of the problem, and he is now paying for the entirety of that problem, the cost of maintaining that. But that's, again, where we had someone call the drain office and let us know what was happening. Won't be eating at those restaurants anytime soon, I can tell you. All right, so other ways is avoid these encroachments. Again, very expensive. Keep your drain easement area clear. That's not where we want to see sheds, fences, swimming pools, if at all possible, because that makes it very, very difficult to maintain the drain. And again, the yard waste in the drain is a huge problem, especially in rain events, because it can clog up the drain. I was at, again, a different county where a board of determination that was the main factor for flooding, basement flooding in the property owners along the drain, was someone continually dumping their lawn refuse in the drain. All right, I think you've had an hour of hardcore drains there.
Yeah. Should we do public questions first prior to board questions? Okay. Is there any questions from the audience members this evening? Any? Okay. What I'd ask you to do is please come over to the podium here. Here, sound good deal? If you please tell us your name and address, and then we'll ask questions.
Great, thanks. My name is Bob Cieslak, and I live at 42203 Greenwood, which is right on Willow Creek. I've lived there between 2 different houses on Willow Creek for over 40 years. And in that 40 years, I have never, ever seen Wayne County do anything. Anything to the creek, anything to the drain. We have collapse of the banks. We have people losing their yards. We have flooding. We take a creek that goes from 3 feet wide to 6 to 12 inches deep to a creek that goes into a 100-foot wide, 10-foot deep raging river. And this is my backyard. And there has never, ever been any maintenance. I've been told by the previous Canton Township engineer, Mr. Tom Casari, that those houses that along Willow Creek should have never been built there. It was a mistake. Father's Day of 1987, we had a so-called alleged 100-year rain, and lots 1, 2, and 3, which is just west of me, were under 3 feet of water, and 2 years later, they built 3 houses on these lots, and nothing ever has changed. I get water within 6 feet of my basement wall, 100 feet across my backyard, and like I said, 10 feet deep. I have no way to protect my grandkids from this mess. I get no maintenance. I've called Wayne County. I've had Wayne County people out. I've had Canton Township people out, and I've gotten nowhere. We've got people now that are losing their backyards, and I've called the drain office, and they tell us that we've been planting the wrong material in the backyard. Well, what about the county? What do they plan on their side? They didn't do anything in the last 40 years. Nothing. And there's nothing left of the bank.
Mr. Cieslak, is there a question for the panel? Because I think what we learned tonight is if we want to have work done, there's a process that we're going to need to go through to engage and begin that process and the steps to correct. Is there any specific questions that you have for the panel this evening related to your parcels?
Yeah, why haven't we had any work done on these, on this drain in 40 years? That's my biggest question.
Well, so to address the issues that you have brought up, and as we explained in the PowerPoint, it will require a petition to be filed to do improvements to the drain. So we can certainly make a petition available for you if that's something that you would be interested in.
This drain is the largest, I've been told is the largest drain in Canton Township. Why would just the homeowners that live on the creek would be responsible for this?
It would not. If it's any residents who are in the entire drainage district, in terms of the petition or being assessed, you only need 5 petitioners, homeowners to petition. So it doesn't necessarily have to be those who are, whose properties abut the drain. It could be any within the drainage district. And then in terms of later on, if there is a project that is found necessary, all the residents would receive a assessment who are in the drainage district.
Okay, but the drain is not working correctly.
But
It
that's,
hasn't been working correctly for years.
Bob, I think the next step here is gather together with 4 neighbors. Let's fill out some paperwork and begin a process. That's the next step that I learned this evening.
Okay, the process is great, but there's nothing been done in 40 years.
Understood. You and I are going to be talking some more, Mr. Cieslak, for sure. Mr. Van Winkle?
My name is Bill Van Winkle, and I'm with the Coves of Canton, which are condos, 148 of them. One of the things I would like to know, how do you determine what an easement is?
All right, so and you're in a condominium?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So the easements through, like in an example, the Coves of Canton, aren't necessarily, the developers of the condominium association didn't necessarily go to get the easement widths to list them on your master deed documents. And so when we're looking at the easement width for a drain, like you see on the list, then we go back to those historic documents and we look at the easement documents or the final orders. In many cases in the 1860s, when many of these drains, the petitioners gave an easement as a as part of signing the easement. And so some of the easements are sufficient width, which might be the case in the Coves of Canton, and then we're going to look at, for purposes of performing work on the drain, how much room do we need for an excavator to perform maintenance. Unfortunately, in many subdivisions, and drain commissioners don't have a lot of discretion to review under the Condominium Act, the drainage within condominiums. Those condo units are right up to the top of the drain, and sometimes their decks are in the drain, making it virtually impossible for the drain office to perform maintenance. And many of the permanent structures are within the drain easement.
One of the problems that we have in the coves is The drain itself is, the banks have been eaten up and they're encroaching upon the condos.
Yep.
And we have other areas, to give you an example, where we have a telephone post, broken obviously, laying in the drain. I don't know where it came from. I always blame Northville, but it must have floated down there somewhere, but, but it's in there. Now, how do we get it out of there?
So I will speak with you after so that I can get more information from you. If there is something that is obstructing the drain, then that is something that we obviously would be able to address under either an emergency or maintenance. In terms of the bank erosion issue, again, that is something that is going to require an improvement. It requires a petition.
Right, and often,
Get a petition going, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Rich Ramey. I live in Pickwick Village, north of Willow Creek. Follow up to the first question. Now, you're saying the resolution is to get a petition, which would drive a special assessment, which would drive a taxation to the residents in the drainage. Using his facts, since he lived there for 40 years, why hasn't it been maintained for 40 years? Then you wouldn't need a petition, you wouldn't need a special assessment. It would have been paid for from the normal costs of maintenance at $5,000 per mile per year. But all of a sudden, it's a petition only to get something done.
so maintenance, regardless of how often you maintain a drain, doesn't prevent the need for the design life or development. But that doesn't mean that even if maintenance occurred each and every year to the maintenance limits, that improvements would not be necessary due to development within the drainage district or just exceeding a design life. So if you look at a car, you can maintain a car at some point, or maintain your bodies at some point. You're just too old. No matter how well you took care of yourself, you've outlived your life span. And for many of the drains, when you're putting in old clay butt joint tiles or whatever, they've outlived their design life and they need to be replaced, no matter how well they're taken care of or not.
Well,
I wouldn't say
I
that no
haven't
maintenance.
reviewed 40 years of records, so I can't sit here and represent this evening that there's never been any maintenance done. I think what we did cover and talk about is there have not been major improvements to drains when you consider how long ago that they were established. And again, kind of, I guess, using your car analogy, if you change your oil every 3,000 miles for 20 years, at some point you've got to replace the brakes, or you have to do some major improvement. And that's, again, the drain code is set up. Again, I truly think it was meant to be a protection. That it's not intended that a drain commissioner or a drainage board can just go off and do large projects without there being a process for there to be input. But again, we're here. We want to be able to address any concerns. I understand if there's frustration about the drain code. Let me tell you, there have been many a days I've been on the phone with Stacy, just absolutely frustrated that it seems in some cases that we're not able to do more that we desire to do. But we are trying to do the best that we can to address any concerns, and we want to make sure, first off, I'll say this, I've spoken with many residents who would say, I had no idea what the process was. I didn't know I had to petition. I didn't know, I never called. I didn't know how to get something done. And that's something that we're trying to do better to educate people so that they do know. But we just want you to know we are here this evening. We want to address the concerns and certainly make sure that it's taken care of going forward.
Thank you, Almika. Sir?
My name is Jim Pappas. I live on the corner of, well, I don't live on I live on Hanford, between Lilly and Pickwick. On the corner of Pickwick and Lilly, there's a drain that I've called and asked about a number of times to get repaired. It's right there. It looks like it's sunk about a foot. There's a big crevice there going right to the drain. Nothing has been done, and that's been over 6 months. I also called about my street that's damaged because of the traffic that's going down Hanford. People are flying down Hanford, breaking up the concrete. I have to end up paying for that. I'm fed up with the way the state is operating. We throw questions at them, we request help, and nothing is done. What can we do?
Regarding the drain repairs, I would like to get more information from you specifically, and I will make sure that our drains manager follows up with you tomorrow. On the roads issue, I will have to refer that to the Wayne County Roads Division. I don't have information on that, but I will refer that to
I
them.
appreciate that. I've called up and spoke to a few people, and they wrote it down. They had someone come out. I have about a 6-inch crevice going across from one side of the street toward the other side. In the middle of the night when traffic's flying down that street, because the state authorized lights to be put at the corner of Haggerty and Hanford and Lilly and Hanford, they fly down that street to try to make that light. Children are going to get hit eventually. People do not want someone driving down a residential street 50 miles an hour. It's ridiculous. And something's just got to be done about it. And I've called the police who have tried. They've gone out and sat in front of my house just recently and caught a few people flying down the street. That's all done by the state. What can we do to stop that kind of thing? What can we do to get those lights? What good is that light at the corner of Lilly and Hanford?
Mr. Pappas, please. The team that's here tonight is specifically drains, drains, and drains. They have nothing to do with the roads.
I know,
But my staff
but,
and my team can help you.
I'm sorry.
I'm not blowing you off.
I'm
I'm not-
sorry. I
yeah.
got carried away.
Yeah, that's okay.
But you know,
the-
it started with the drain at the corner of Pickwick and Hanford, and then I got carried away with that. I
That's okay.
apologize.
That's okay.
But it is a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas, and we are taking notes up here as well, so there'll be some follow-up. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm Carl Fansel. I live at 42133 Greenwood, and that is also right on the Willow Creek. One question I had regarding the maintenance on the creek itself, when the new subdivision was put in there on the old farmland, why that wasn't revised. We've noticed a major increase in the amount of water coming down through the creek, and the erosion is terrible. My next door neighbor lost at least 10 foot of his yard already, as an example. We also have, I've caught kids throwing debris in the creek and had them take it back out, but there's some type of a gas tank or something in there that I can't get out that needs to be removed. That's going to be an obstruction there. The other question I had was regarding the special assessment. If I understand correctly, it would be for everybody that drains into the creek itself, not just the people that are on the creek.
Correct. The entire watershed. So
Okay.
Willow Creek, I think that's one of the biggest watersheds in Canton Township.
Okay, all right, that because I had
1,000
heard
or more
originally it
residents.
was
Yep.
just going to be the people that were affected on the creek.
Nope, nope, it would be anyone who's, when the drop of water falls on your property and it eventually gets to that creek, you would be included in that special assessment district.
So for Willow Creek, you believe there's more than 6,000 homes? Or do we know a number?
I don't have the number of parcels with me, but Chris may be able to look it up. But the two biggest watersheds, or the two biggest drainage districts in Canton Township, are the Fellows Creek, which I believe is run about 12,000 parcels, and a close second is Willow Creek. The third one, I think, is the Green and Branches, which is a tributary of the Fellows Creek, but it is a big tributary of the Fellows Creek.
Because originally and this was probably put in back in, I would say no later than the 1920s possibly, but it's like a 3-foot culvert inside, and like my neighbor said, it gets 50, 100 foot across. and it's a raging river. I've had telephone poles that, because the water finally receded, were stuck in the backyard. And next time it rained, they're gone. That's how much water there is. I mean, full telephone poles that just float right on down the creek.
Yep, so these drains were established in the 1800s and were not designed for subdivisions. And so unless there's a petition by property owners or the municipality, we can't increase their capacity. And you have to have a petition to increase capacity.
Oh, I
So you're
understand.
asking for an 1800 structure or, infrastructure to deal with modern day. And so that's what you're seeing for the Fellows Creek, the Willow Creek, any of these. We can't control development, but we're asked to deal with the ramifications of it from a stormwater standpoint.
Doesn't
And we
Wayne County-
cannot do that without a petition. And if no one petitions us, there's nothing we can do.
But doesn't Wayne County authorize the permits for the subdivision that was built?
But if they meet the requirements, then the permit needs to be issued. So we can't stop development. And it's different pieces and parts that happen over an amalgamation of time. So in a big watershed like your watershed, that doesn't happen overnight, and it's not one subdivision's fault. It's kind of like Jenga. Different things happen, and it's an amalgamation of all those things over time that finally hits the point where that happens. And until we get a petition, we can't increase that capacity, and we can't deal with those types of.
Those today?
We can't today, but we can take your name and provide it to you, yes. And like I said, many of the drains hasn't seen petitions through the drain office in decades, some in a century.
Is there any additional public questions? Seeing none. Board questions, comments? I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Please, if you come to the podium. We'd ask that you share your name and address.
Just for information purposes, the meetings are recorded, and so if you speak from the chairs, people who are not here but maybe listening to the recordings will never understand what you said, and so it sounds a little bit confusing.
My name's Susan Munn, and I live in the Coves of Canton condominium complex. All I wanted to know, we keep talking about this petition, so as soon as I get home, I'm going to be saying to myself, okay, how do I write that petition? What's it supposed to look like? Where are the guidelines for that petition? 'Cause I would
We
like to do
prefer if
that.
we write it for you.
You write
So,
it
so
for
if you contact the drain office, we will provide you with a copy of one and circulator instructions.
We
Absolutely.
contact who now?
Actually, after this meeting, I will get your contact information.
Okay.
And we will make one available for you. So you won't have to write it yourself. We'll take care of that and give it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, you would need to and we provide an instruction sheet that explains what needs to be filled in on what lines, but it does need to be signed by 5 property owners.
Now segue to board questions, comments.
Right down here. Ladies first.
Thank you it was a very good presentation. I learned a lot, and as I had questions, you answered them as we went through, so thank you very much. The other question I have is, what does this mean for development? So if a developer wants to develop a parcel of land, because as you know, we subdivide land and we rezone it, and a drain goes through that property, I mean, should we make sure that no building occurs within a certain, distance from the easement? Because it sounds like some of the condos, from what the residents were saying, goes right up to the drain. So is that important, or?
Elmika's office works closely with Wayne County DPS permits now. Not just Elmika, but her predecessor, Ken Cassell, really made an effort to have the 2 different departments work together. And so we're not trying to stop development. What we try and do is we try and make developers aware of the fact that there is a county drain through a property. And Elmika's office, the Drain Commissioner's office, is willing to entertain relocations or moving the drain over or working with developers. There's many things that we can do in order to ensure that the natural resource is protected while also developing the land. So the biggest thing is letting us know. I think a lot of time there was a lot of fear of like, hey, let me try and get this development in real quick without people at the county knowing that we're doing this or the other, but really, that's going to come back and bite you. It's a lot better if that information is known. Omika's staff she only has 4 or 5 people, so she can't police the entire county trying to see what new developments are going up and what's not going up.
And through the Wayne County Permits Office, one of the things that we added is when developers pick up a packet, they get information. Well, now included in that packet is if there is a county drain that is on the parcels to be developed, there's information and there are instructions. And again, sometimes it is, having the plans reviewed, and it may be acceptable to just simply record an easement for the drain in its existing location. Other times, it will be relocated, and that's something that we work closely with, because again, we do not want to hold up development, but at the same time, we want to make sure that there's proper, obviously, management of the drain and stormwater generally.
I just add also, there's been, over the last probably 15 to 20 years, many cases where we've been working collectively with Wayne County and the developers when there's been a requirement, a requested development where we've been sensitive to the drain relocations and actually moved several drains in the township to protect them, in essence.
That's a very good point, and in some cases, we've, met even before a application was made for a permit, so that the developers can know upfront and ahead of time what some of the expectations would be, even before they went to apply for a permit through the permits office.
That'd be the same for a homeowner who said, just moved in and they want to put in a built-in swimming pool and they don't realize, do they have to come in for a permit, obviously, if it's built in, and would they be told about that?
Yeah, they would not require a county permit for that sort of thing. That's more of an internal permit process. But by then, the development, if it's in an existing platted subdivision development or a condominium, those development plans are already in place, and any easements that were known at the time that those were created are on the drawings.
A property owner does know, and sometimes there are individuals who are not aware that they are along a drain, but if they do know, they should be contacting our office, the drain office, before they would build a swimming pool, because again, the issues that come up with encroachments later on, they built the swimming pool and it's within the drain easement, but then, when we go to do a petition project, those are considerations. It could be a scenario where it would be permitted and allowed, or there would be an encroachment agreement that just explains we acknowledge it will be within the drain easement, but if there were something to occur where we needed to move the fence or shed in order to do a project, we want to make sure that there's some form of an acknowledgement.
We encourage building permit officials to check with the drain office before they issue a building permit to see if there's a drain easement.
Diane, you had a question?
Yeah, and thank you very much. This was very informative. I have a question on the special assessment districts. When they go on the winter taxes, is it by the size of the parcel, or how do you, because I know this last winter, we had people coming in and their neighbor was 5 cents more than theirs was, and so how do you determine the cost of the assessment?
The drain code basically says that the assessment is based on benefit, so that is very vague. In Wayne County, the Wayne County Drain Commissioner looks at a couple of factors. They first look at the acreage, so the size of the parcel. Then they look at the land use classification, so whether that parcel is classified as an industrial parcel or a residential or an agricultural. That's the second thing that they look at. And then another thing that they look at, if there's any special considerations that have been made to that parcel as part of that project or as part of that petition project for that assessment. So that would be on a project-by-project basis. On the ones that Canton encountered in the last couple of years, we were basically looking at acreage and land use. Those were the two coefficients that were taken into account for the special assessment. So in theory, if you were a residential parcel and you had 1 acre, and your neighbor was a residential parcel and had 1 acre, the assessment would be exactly the same. However, if your parcel was 1 acre and your neighbor's parcel was 1.1 acres, the assessment would be different.
Thank you.
Summer?
For the 42 drains that we have in Canton Township, and you talked about the different jurisdiction, who has jurisdiction over which drains, is there a list somewhere over who has jurisdiction over which of these drains and how many of the orphan drains that we have?
Okay, of the list we provided you, each and every one of those, the drain office has jurisdiction.
Okay.
And so as to any other storm water systems in the township, it really is the legal answer, it depends. And we'd have to look at exactly what it was.
Yeah, generally, kind of the rule of thumb is if it's township-owned property, as a township, we're different than a city. We have no jurisdiction over roads, so we have a much more limited jurisdiction over stormwater in the community. You know, but for a few developments or portions of developments in the community, largely the stormwater systems that we're responsible are for just our properties, like this complex, Independence Park, Patriot Park, et cetera.
Steve?
Thank you for the information. You answered most of my questions, even as they were being brought up, and the education was great. My only question is for Director Foss. Is there any decisions that the board will be making in the next several months or year that will use this information for, that you can think of?
Nothing pending. It was really kind of in the last board's term when these drainage district assessment boundaries or drainage district boundaries were changed. The board was, I think, informed that we were a participant in that. I think overall the township's assessment was roughly 10% of those costs, if I recall kind of the breakdown that we saw, because we too get noticed, just as Stacy had mentioned. But I don't think that there's anything pending. It's really more informational in order to help residents, such as those that spoke tonight, with educating them on the petition process.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
We do have a petition for
Fellows
Fellows
Creek.
Creek, so we will be holding a board of determination in the near future, and if you'd like to see that in action, we welcome you to attend that, and you will be receiving notice when
be a
that happens.
Good opportunity also to make the ask. We've been working since Almika made the request 3 or 4 months ago of us to try to find people to participate on that board of determination. We found one so far. Again, as Stacy pointed out, the individuals cannot reside in Canton to participate on a drain improvement project that's going to be assessed in Canton, but we do have one Plymouth or Plymouth Township
The
resident
township resident.
that is willing, so we could,
We do have some additional candidates, so we think we'll be getting that finalized this month, so then we can get the Board of Determination meeting scheduled.
We're looking for individuals who have a fairly good handle on financial information as well as technical information.
Actually, I mean, it can be a citizen. They don't necessarily have to have a technical background. I think
Oh.
it helps if they do, or at least are comfortable with how meetings should be governed. I think that is helpful, but they don't necessarily have to be an expert in a field.
One thing I do want to say about the Board of Determinations, and especially for the Fellows Creek, is that what the board is there to do is to listen to testimony, and many times the people that are opposed to a project are the ones that are the most vocal, and the people that have the problems, I think, sometimes shy away. And, you know, the people that come and sit in the board they don't have any history on, you know, the problems or the drain. They're just there to listen to landowners. So if you're a resident and you have problems and you get a notice to attend a board of determination, you need to make sure that you go and you need to make sure that you speak up. Because like I said, I've been at many of them where they've been found not necessary because the only people that spoke were the people that were saying, hey, there is no problem. And the people that had a problem were a little bit too shy. So what happened? It was found not necessary. There was no project.
And the Board of Determination, they make that decision that evening, so they have open deliberations after they hear all of the testimony, and they make the decision. And again, if most of the people who show up are opposed to it, and that's the testimony that they've received, you can see that obviously in some instances, it's going to be found not necessary.
I agree with Elmika. I don't think it requires technical, and sometimes my experience has been they're trying to solve the problem instead of listening, letting the engineers do that, listening to the concerns of the property owners. So I think the best Board of Determination members are good listeners who can take control of a meeting if it's getting out of hand and making sure everybody's voice is heard.
Good. John, Mike?
Could you explain the makeup of the Drain Commission? Is there a commissioner and then so many board members, or?
You know, we failed to do that for you, and I apologize. That is a basic question that I meant to include in the PowerPoint, so I appreciate very much your question. Elmika, Wayne County is unique in the state to that, so I'm going to let Elmika explain that.
So typically in other counties, the drain commissioner is a separately elected official. In some counties, is referred to as the water resources commissioner. Wayne County is unique under Wayne County's charter. Wayne County used to have a separately elected drain commissioner. Then in the 1980s, Wayne County's charter was revised so that the duties of the drain commissioner are now housed within the Wayne County Department of Public Services. At the time, it was the Department of Environment, but that has since merged with the Department of Public Services. So in Wayne County, the position of drain commissioner is an appointed position. For some of the drains, they are considered to be under the jurisdiction of the drain commissioner. There are other drains, depending on how it was established under the drain code, that would be governed by a drainage board, and the drain code sets the membership of those particular boards. So for some drains that are within the county, it would be the county drain commissioner, an individual appointed by the county executive, and then a Wayne County commissioner who covers that particular district where that drainage district is located. For inter-county drains, there's a different structure, and again, Wayne County is even more unique there, but that just gives you an idea.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, the overwhelming majority of your drains that are on that list are regular county drains under the jurisdiction of the drain commissioner.
A feeling that Judge Markman was correct in his opinion. What's the budget of the Wayne County Drain Commission?
So again, that's where it goes back to that $5,000 per mile of drain limit.
No, you all are not free, right? You're paid.
Yeah, so
how-
actually the way.
The Wayne County
Yeah.
Drain Commission must have a budget to pay their employees within that
So
commission.
this is again where we are unique, being in the Department of Public Services. If you were to look at our org chart, we are actually combined with sewage systems. It's not just a separate drain office all by itself. So if we are providing services for a particular drain, then those costs would be paid to that particular drain or charged back to that drain.
You know how many projects between 2016 and 17 the Drain Commission has approved or worked on?
Between 2016 and 2017, we have not had any petition projects. We have performed.
None at all?
No. Not a petition.
In Canton Township or in Wayne County?
Wayne County, the
Yeah.
commission.
For the entire county, we have had some petition projects, but overwhelmingly, we're doing maintenance on a drain.
Any idea how many projects and how much do these projects cost total?
Well, it varies. The drain office just completed one project, which is called the Belden Tile in New Boston. So that is their most recent petition project. That was a project, the overall
About $800,000.
$800,000 projects, and that was a storm sewer project. So that was an enclosed drain. So the projects vary. Stacy, I think, mentioned the impacts of having development right up to the drain banks. We were looking at a drain in Southgate, not a very big drain, and the contractor's estimate was over $2 million because there were houses along the drain. We were looking at drain that same drain, twice the size in Sumter Township, would be about $200,000, you know, because we're working along a farm field. So it really varies based on the neighboring
Big
properties.
project, one big project.
We do-
But the, recently, the drainage district, at least here in Canton, was expanded. Why was that done? And where does that money go from that we pay on our tax bill to the Wayne County?
Okay, so there's 42 drainage districts in Canton Township, and they were revised. So each one was not expanded by 10%, et cetera. It was dependent. Some of them shrank in acreage, some of them increased in acreage based on the topography or the watershed. And so that didn't bring a penny more to the drain office by doing that. That just changed the makeup of who paid for it or how much they paid.
That money goes into the Wayne County general budget, or does it go to the?
No,
Where's it go?
absolutely not. It only goes for the cost incurred for the benefit of that drain.
And just to clear, and it would be for, so if you're
But
looking
no,
at.
but no
your-
work, for instance, where I live, it's on Fellows Creek, I think it is. There's been no improvement on that district yet. Over the years, we've been paying money into that fund. Where's that money
So
go?
there is no
For
fund.
maintenance.
Where's the money go that I pay on that assessment district? Where's it go?
Okay, so there are an account for each drain in Wayne County. And like Almika says, she keeps track of her time, we keep track of our time, each employee keeps track of their time. Every penny spent, if there's 800 drains in Wayne County, we have to keep track of these 800 separate ones. So the mailing for the Fellows Creek gets charged to the Fellows Creek Drainage District.
The work done on that drainage.
And the work drain.
Yes.
But what did you do with the money I gave you?
So it will
Went
go
to
to
pay the
to pay the, remember, there's the $5,000.
Where did it go? No, stop. I paid you, let's say, $1. Where did that dollar go? Where'd you spend it? Did you spend it on administrative costs? Because you haven't spent it on fixing that drain, I'll tell you that.
It depends on the year. For example, the Fellows Creek, how long is the Fellows Creek, Chris? How many miles? 7 miles. The Fellows Creek is 7 miles long.
Right.
So if one of your Fellows Creek Drainage District residents that lives 5 miles from you calls and says, I have a power pole in the drain that needs to be removed.
I'm telling you, no work has been done on that drainage sometimes for 40 years. Where did the money that I pay on my taxes and the other residents to you all, where did you spend it? Did it go for administrative costs, which I think is where it went, because it didn't go to fix the ditch?
Okay, so again, I want to make sure we're clear. There has been no petition. There's a current petition for the Fellows Creek Drain.
Right, okay, I understand.
There is maintenance under that $5,000 per mile of drain limit that the drain code sets forth that is done. And that's a good example that Mr. Velez gave. Oftentimes someone say, hey, I got an assessment. You've never worked. I've never seen you at my house, but maybe someone several miles away called for a request. When the funds are expended, then on the winter tax bill, let's say, I'm just going to just keep it simple. Let's say someone called and said there's an obstruction in the drain and it cost us $5,000 to remove that obstruction. That's then going to appear on the winter tax bill. And then when the money is paid to the townships, then turn the money over to the Wayne County Treasurer, who then will replenish that particular drain fund. It is very detailed because when that money is coming from the local assessors to the Wayne County Treasurer, you know this is for Fellows Creek, this is for Barker, this is for, whatever the particular drain is. So it's going to that particular drains fund.
But if your question,
There should be a lot of money in that drain fund for Fellows Creek.
no, because you assess after the costs are incurred.
I know
So,
that, but I've been taxed a certain amount, let's say $1.
yep.
You just increased the district and increased that. That money went to you all. What'd you do with it?
It went to replenish the funds that were expended for maintenance.
There's been no maintenance on that.
So we don't have the maintenance records for Fellows Creek. We can, if the board is interested in that, we can get that to Mr. Foss, because we do maintain records of when work
I think
occurred.
what
give
you're
up. I
asking
give
for,
up. You
no.
win.
What you're asking for, there's an answer, and there's a database that exists within the county, what's been expended over the last 5 years in Canton Township. That's what Mr. Anthony's asking for.
Exactly.
And if we could please have that sent over through Tim's office, that would answer a lot of questions that John has, as well as some of the residents this evening.
One final question. From the time a petition is filed with you all, what would be the average time? I know some districts, you got that big one up there in Macomb County, but an average time frame from the time a petition would be filed by the citizens until the actual project was fixed, was completed, would be are we talking months, years, whatever?
It truly does
I know it's gonna vary.
It will vary depending on the size of the drain, the severity of the issues. So the drain code does not give a certain time limit, and it will vary.
So in here in Township, we move from petition to construction in a matter of months. We move very quickly, and even for a sizable project like that. But if there's permitting issues or property acquisition, it is not unusual, Wayne County or not, anywhere in the state, for it to take a period of years.
Thank you.
Questions, Michael?
Sure. I know, so like the school district recently, which exists on the park, the high schools, exists on the Willow Creek drain at the very kind of north end. And the bond committee was redoing the surface of one of the bus loop. And its stormwater went off into the Willow drain. But because there was a repair or a replacement of the bus loop, the county asked that there be a stormwater retention put in, which would then, I assume, relieve any additional stormwater that would go into that drain, which would be hurting the residents here. Additionally, when we approve site plans for like condominiums and other newer developments, it looks like there are stormwater retention ponds that are put in there. So my question then is as new development comes in, how is it determined when there will be a retention pond that would so that stormwater would not be going directly into the drain, or how is that determined, and how much of these new developments actually goes into these existing drains?
So the answer is any new development is restricted by design to not flow any greater stormwater off its site than what they call the pre-development conditions. So if it flowed a certain number of gallons per minute or cubic feet per second from the site as undeveloped property, once you pave it and develop and build it out, it's going to produce more runoff. But the stormwater retention system is designed to restrict that runoff to no greater than the runoff that came off from that site when it was raw, kind of undeveloped property.
So how long have we been doing that, or how long has the state been doing that, or the
How long have those existed? Since late 80s?
Right,
Well, that was an interesting point that you brought up, the concern about the Pulte development, and we'll definitely follow up with that, because that should certainly not be occurring based on what was designed and what was permitted. Yeah.
Right.
So we'll definitely look into that question about the site that I'm sorry, was it Tramey? No. What was your last name? Thance. Yeah. Got it. Yep. Thanks.
Because that was, I mean, it was my assumption that new development was not able to adversely affect the drains, but then a statement was made that these drains were not built to maintain all of this new development. And so I had a hard time kind of squaring both of those concepts in my head.
I think when we say new development, we're saying new development from the 1800s.
Okay, so everything that occurred up to the 1980s.
Yeah, these ditches, these
So if
ditches
I
in Canton
approve-
Township were originally drained when we had 40-acre tracts of farmland.
Right.
And, you know, we didn't even have stormwater detention until the 80s. So, I mean, we're talking of, 60 worth years of development where there was no detention.
And the other point I think is very important is death by 1,000 cuts. So you're requiring detention on new big developments, but we're talking every time a driveway is paved, every time a new garage is put up, a shed, all of that, when you add it all up, makes a huge difference,
Yeah.
especially in these smaller watersheds.
Right, but for my purposes, if like I approve a development, like ideally, you know, if the engineers have looked at it and you know your environmental people at the county have looked at it, there would be no additional water flowing into any of these existing 42 drains after that development has been constructed. That's my understanding.
That's how they're designed.
Okay, perfect.
I think we've gone the full 2 hours now. I've got one that's a statement more than a question, because you've answered dozens and dozens of questions I did have. 2019 budgets, Steve, to answer your question, yes, there's going to be a point in time in the near future where you're going to be asked, or we're going to be moving some money around, because there's a petition in front of us. We don't know the size of the project until after the Board of Determination makes a decision to go forward, and then Almika's team will go to work and do their thing. They're going to tell us a number. That's 10 cents on the dollar that's going to come out of general funds. General fund? Water sewer. Which tower does it come out of? Water sewer?
Well, we have not done one of these in some time. Right now, the assessments are being paid out of the Water and Sewer Fund Stormwater section.
All right, so there's going to be, at some point, some money moving around, and the board's going to be asked to take a look at it. It also sounds like there may be one or two more petitions coming at us. It may not be 2019 numbers, 2020, but it's coming, okay? So, outstanding job, guys. Thank you very much. We appreciate the time. Really, we got a lot of work in front of us coming. I can see it. No additional comments. Yes, go please.
Well, it's about the Roads Task Force meeting on
Oh, yes,
Thursday.
yeah.
Just want to remind people that we're having our first Roads Task Force meeting here in this room Thursday at 6:30, and everyone's invited.
Thank you. Good call, Summer. Any additional board comments? Call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Or
Those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, guys.